So to remove the headlight, first we're going to have to remove the ring that goes around it. There's just one screw here. Once you remove that, this trim piece will turn to the left and then pull off. And then it'll expose the bracket holding in the headlight itself. So you're going to remove the 3 screws that are holding in the headlight. There's one here, here, and here. Once you remove those, you'll pull the headlight out, and there's 2 connectors you'll remove. Behind the headlight, underneath the top here, there's a little nut up here. It's a 5/16. You're going to need to remove that, and that will allow you to remove this trim piece here, which is housing the one bolt that's holding in your cover here. Right here where your ignition is, you're actually just going to pry up here underneath the plastic and pop this cover off. It'll expose 2 screws that are also holding in this housing that will need to be removed. So on the new Road King, there is a connector here. I'm sure all the touring models have them, at least the newer ones. This black and white connector that's just kind of hanging down, I don't know if you can see that. This one here, this is the lead for the throttle cable. So you'll actually just tie right into that with the existing wire harness on the grip heaters. Alright, so we're going to start with the left side, the clutch side, which is actually the side that's going to have the adjuster for your heat setting. This is definitely the hardest side to complete. This is where you're going to actually route the wires in. On the throttle side, it's actually got a quick connect and there's no wiring required. So it is somewhat plug and play, but we'll go into details on that later. All you have to do is remove these 2 bolts here, which is a T27, and then these 2 bolts on the rear, which are T25. These 2 bolts on the rear, they actually are going to stay into the housing when you back them out, so once they become loose they won't fall out, which is nice. These 2, however, will not do the same. So before you begin, you need to ask yourself a question on if you like where your switches are located right now, if the ergonomics are good. This is the time to address that while you're taking these components off of the bike. I personally am good with how they're set up, so I don't want them to change. So I'm going to take a Sharpie and I'm going to mark right here on the handlebars between the clutch cylinder here and the housing, and that'll leave me a line so I can come back later and make sure everything lines up right where it's at today. On these newer bikes, there's a nice little drop here in the handlebar where everything slides up to, and I can see on this bike there's pretty much no gap there, so I'll know I need to push all the way in, but I want to make sure that the alignment is right. So I'm going to put a little line here, and then with my black bars it's hard to see. However, with the flashlight I can see where I just put that mark, so later I can come back and make sure that the orientation is correct the way it is right now. Alright, so let's go ahead and start backing out these 2 bolts here. And then again, T25 for the 2 rear bolts. Alright, so now that the housing is removed, we have to remove this handle. Now on the driver's side, it's not hooked up by adhesive or anything like that. It's kind of held by the housing here. On this side, however, there is glue on here that holds this in place. So it's going to be an effort to get this off, but really you just kind of keep twisting until you can break some of that adhesive free, and then eventually it'll slide off. That was a chore. Getting this grip off is ridiculous. In the end, what I ended up having to do is getting a little bit of space here, and on the side of the grips there were 2 little holes, so I stuck a small screwdriver in there and kind of pried it up and sprayed some WD-40. As soon as I did that, came right off. Do yourself a favor, go straight to that. I was trying not to be destructive, but there's no sense. That was insane. So anyways, now we have access so that we can install the new hand grip, and it comes with 2 wires. You have the red and black, which is your power, and then of course you have your black and white, which is going to connect to a connector down here underneath there's a connector here that connects to your throttle cable. So that should be pretty simple. There is no connection on the 2018 Road King Special for the power, so we're going to have to do some splicing. More on that later. Okay, so now that we have the cover off, the driver's side just slides right off. It's actually really simple. Pull off, and as we look here, this here is the mechanism that controls your throttle now. It's actually kind of neat. And on the end there's a cap. Let me move it around so you can see it. So on this cap, this needs to come off and it'll expose the two inputs where the driver's side or the throttle grip will plug into. So I'm going to pop this off now. Just give it a little, just not too much, but you'll feel it pop off. And if you look right here, there's two little ports here, and on the new grip you can see on the outside these two little ports are actually what's going to plug into that once this slides on, and we're going to do that now. So we'll just slide the throttle on and come back around here. And we're going to guide this in as straight as we can until it fits properly. And just like that, it'll slide in. Alright, so now that you've wired or sent your wires through the handlebars, you can see we have our black and white connector here, which is going to power up the throttle heater, and then we have our black and red as well. Now this one, again, we're going to have to splice and power into existing power up front, and to do that we're going to have to tap into two different things. So one, on your left side you'll see there is a white flat connector here. It's got a brown and yellow on one side and a purple and blue on the other. That purple and blue, that's what we're going to use for power. So your red wire here is going to be tapped into the purple here. And then for ground, the black, there's another connector in here. This one right here. It's for the fender light, and it's a European option. But we're going to peel back this shielding here and tap into the black wire there. There's a solid blue and a solid black. Black, obviously, the ground. That's what we're going to power into. Alright, after wiring, that's pretty much it. As you can see, I've tapped into the black lead here, and that part is back there. Also tapped into. Just turn it on the ignition and give it a quick test. Give it a couple minutes and you'll start to feel heat, and that's pretty much it. All that's left now is putting the bike back together, and now we have heated grips.